Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Beyond the Noise, where we help separate noise from signal across the esports industry. I'm Alex Fletcher, and today we have another impromptu episode, courtesy of news that Ted Leonsis, owner of the NBA's Washington Wizards, is now controlling owner, along with his ownership group, of Team Liquid, one of the more long-standing and venerable esports organizations. This on the heels of yesterday's announcement that the Philadelphia 76ers, also of the National Basketball Association, bought another long-standing club, Team Dignitas, as well as the LCS spot for Team Apex. So a lot has gone on, and in this episode, just want to go through some of the key elements of the announcement to try to shed some light on it, provide a little bit of understanding, and figure out what's coming up next. So let's start with an overview, what happened, figure out if esports investments or team buys are shiny new toys for really rich people. Maybe not. Industry growth. This is important here because we need to understand the general direction that the esports industry is taking. Talk about effect on competitive integrity in the maturation of the world's first digital sport, and then a forward-facing outlook related to what's next. So, what just happened? Like I said, a lot's occurred over the last 24 hours or so. As someone who's based in the Washington, D.C. area, I'm very familiar with Ted Leonsis. He's owner of the Washington Capitals of the NHL, the Washington Wizards, also an Arena Football League team, and the WNBAs, which is the women's professional league in the USA, Washington Mystics. So, and for those who are actually born after 1995, Mr. Leonsis is the man behind AOL. That's a name a lot of people don't remember. But he's a sharp mind, great businessman, and he's a sports guy through and through. I think this is a great move in general. I reached out to some people who are outside of esports and gaming, and it's interesting because my opinion was that there's an underlying feel that, the parents are in charge now. And now esports can grow, and I think it's the other way around, actually. I think that this is a situation where there are first of all, there are other deals like this in the pipeline, because it takes about 18 months to complete something like this. And so we're going to see more over the next 6 months at least. However, this really, to me, was a case of you can't buy credibility, especially in esports. So you got to acquire it. You got to hire it. And for all the money in the world, it was impossible to really build what Team Liquid did, if you think about it. I mean, look at the challenges that organizations like Echo Fox and NRG, they're going to have to go through a process. It's not going to happen overnight. Just because you throw VC money at it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to say, look, mom, in esports. And it's not so much just that Ted Leonsis and his group and the 76ers are going to bring to bear their expertise and competency, which they are. They bring a lot to the table, but it's also that Team Liquid, Team Dignitas, they have something that you can't necessarily buy, that you have to acquire, you have to hire. It's that credibility. And it cuts both ways. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the tech media style investment a little later on. Now, the question that's almost on everyone's mind is esports buys or purchases of teams, are they the shiny new toy for people in the sports world? Or are they strategic investments? Are these, hey, look, this thing is going to be huge, we're going to get in early where there's less risk? Or is it oh man, if I could do it on my own, I would, but I can't, so I've got more money than time, and I'm going to buy my way in? We've yet to see, because really these are still dots. Now, there's been VC money behind the building of teams, like I mentioned with Echo Fox and NRG Esports. But still, we can't draw substantive lines to understand exactly what this means. We don't have 10 years of history. We don't even have a year. We don't even have a handful of these investments. I think there's some key issues around product integration because there are more similarities between different traditional sports than there are between esports and a traditional sport. And so understanding the esport product in theory is one thing, but when you make an investment of this level, and I think Darren Rovell, he put it at between 5 and 15 million, I think over 10 million. I think 8 figures is just insane. I think it's probably between 5 and 7 million. Don't quote me on that. But you make an investment like that, you have to make some assumptions. And when you don't have any experience with the esports product, there's a question of how you're going to integrate it into your portfolio. After all, these ownership groups that are a part of this, they're used to buying stakes or buying teams, multiple teams, in different sports. But really, there are similarities with esports, but there's a lot of differences. And then supply versus demand. I mean, what's the supply for assets in the esports market, if you will? How much money, investment, interest, groundswell of interest or potential money is out there for the purchase of similar teams, organizations, spots, or even companies? We've seen a number of VC firms make a move on companies that are servicing the esports marketplace, but from a team perspective, exactly how many orgs could probably support realistically a 7-figure price tag without a bubble forming? That's a huge question. Now, on to industry growth. Once again, with any market, there's an industry of players who service that market. For the market of competitive video games, part of that industry are the teams. A very prominent part are the teams. And this investment is going to follow some predictable models, predictable growth curves. I think right now we've seen the introduction of the esports marketplace, and we're in a growth phase. We're seeing expansive growth where different players from outside the space, angles are really cropping up, but it's top heavy. It's almost like an invest and grow perspective, where if you look at how sports evolved, there was like decades of team businesses evolving as singular entities before there was an influx of money to purchase them. So the business models, the businesses didn't look like they do today per se, but they had a chance to mature. And don't get me wrong, I mean, Team Liquid has been around for a decade plus. The same thing with Team Dignitas. These are not overnight. These are not overnight aberrations by any means. A great deal of hard work, dedication went into both of those organizations. I'm saying top heavy from the perspective that the investment is happening at a rapid rate, and really organizations like Dignitas and Liquid were really on the left. They were at the very emergent stage of esports, and so investment at this point isn't like it's overnight, but it's still very, very early. And the lack of organization in general across, especially the competitive scene, is a note of caution, because for any industry there needs to be a sense of organization. In the sports world, when you're talking about teams, leagues do the organizing of teams so fans and revenues can flow in a predictable fashion. Without that in esports, you have to question, how is this investment going to factor into industry growth? Surely it's going to grow the pot, but is it going to be in a sustainable way? And where's the framework for that sustainability? And here's a question or an angle that I'm particularly interested in. It's the maturation of the world's first and only digital sport. I mean, Team Liquid, for example, is a part of the Professional Esports Association. Them now being a part of Ted Leonsis' group, how does that affect the other team members in the PEA? What about competitive integrity? Does it create an arms race for taking outside funding in order to be able to compete with the player salaries that Team Liquid and Team Dignitas will be able to offer as a result of being a part of these massively large groups, sports groups. In essence, esports is really a free market, but sports is actually the exact opposite of a free market. Like if you look at how sports is structured, it's very centrally planned. Leagues don't grow unless they sit down and say, here's how we're going to grow. And esports is a free market, and I'm not advocating against that. I'm saying there's very real impact behind that reality. And there's significant implications on the maturation of sport itself, and that money will change things. And if, as we mentioned earlier, there's a lack of organization, how is that investment going to affect what the sport itself looks like in 2 to 5 years? And now, where from here? Once again, we're seeing dots, not lines just yet. I personally think the gravy train is going to keep on rolling. I think there's way more money interested in doing and making similar deals than there probably are viable assets. So I don't think that anyone who's interested in selling or joining a group, an ownership group, a team, is going to have any problem getting that deal going or getting that deal to the table. I also think that brands that really were very much reticent about esports are going to start to line up to reach these valuable demographics now that there's a trusted partner. And I don't put that in quotes because the purchasers of these organizations aren't trusted. They are. But I think it's just a matter of perspective and comfort. Not that brands can't get involved with non-endemic brands especially can't get involved with organizations who aren't a part of ownership groups like this, but just from a psychological perspective, it's a lot easier to trust someone who's been in the sports world or the tech world than it is to go into a new space essentially alone. And then finally, investor relations. Who's responsible for making sure that investment flows the right way? I mean, free markets, they have their they're positive in certain ways, and they have some drawbacks. The question is, how does it affect, like I said, the maturation of the sport, and who's responsible for ensuring that these types of investments happen in a sustainable way? That's a question that hasn't yet been answered. So that's all I have for this week. Thank you for joining me once again. I'm open to any questions, comments, feedback. Hit the subscribe button if you want to get alerted when new Beyond the Noise episodes go out. And I'll catch you guys next time around. Thanks for joining. Bye.